You're listening to Crossing the Axis, the podcast that explores the commercial side of film production, with your host, James Keblas.
Welcome, listeners, and thank you for tuning into the show. I'm excited about this episode, not only because of the talented and funny guest I get to talk to, but also because they are veterans in the advertising business, who I think are going to bring some good insights into the agency and production company relationship, particularly when it comes to making spots for clients. I think most production company owners would agree that it's nice having a mix of clients between brands and agencies. I think it kind of exercises different muscles. I think it offers a different skill base. It probably deals with a lot of ADD issues if you're like me and have that. So you kind of can take your attention one way or the other. But more than anything else, what I've enjoyed about working with agencies as a production company, more than anything else, is it's just so nice when an agency does all of that client development work. When an agency is, particularly if they're trying to sell through bold ideas or some risky campaigns, and you have to bring the client along, whatever it might be your CMO or whoever, and you have to convince them that this is a good idea. Then once you convince them, then you have to empower them and convince their peers and their bosses that it's a good idea. You have to end up working with strategists and make sure that the idea is connected to the outcomes and the goals of the business. And there's so many opportunities for it to fall apart. There's so many opportunities for it just to die. And when it gets all the way through and it actually gets going, it's a really tremendous amount of work. And I always have tipped my hat to the agencies that do that so well. And hopefully they've explained to the client that the true cost of doing the campaign, right? They convinced the client that, it's worth the money to spend it and do it right, or not to do it at all. And so when that kind of client development work is done, the budget is right, and then they just bring this, nice thing all together to the production companies. They have to get the treatments, you got the scripts, you got the plans, the fears, everything. It's all planned out. And all the production company has to do is make sure the vision comes alive as promised, right? Ain't no pressure or anything like that. But I always really like that. And I think that that's what I'm hoping to unpack in this conversation and a whole bunch more. So it gives me great honor to be joined today by Justin Hooper and Steve Williams from the agency Undnyable. I am a big fan of their work because I think, first and foremost, if you haven't been to their website, you should go, because they are masters of comedic advertising and do a great job making spots that I think are both entertaining and memorable. I find a lot of little Easter eggs in their stuff that kind of keep my attention. It's very, very effective. So I'm excited for this conversation for that. I'm curious to hear how they describe themselves, but if I were to take a stab at it, I landed on the idea of strategically subversive. It was how I coined it. I said that because when I look at your spots, I don't think they're cliche. They're not formulaic. In fact, they take cliches and formulas and throw them on their heads, and that makes them unpredictable. And that's what I love about them. It works for me. It makes me think they're bold, and I think that the clients that go for that are going to be bold, and so they're going to make products that are bold. So there's a better product than their competitors. I mean, that's kind of the logic train that goes through my head, and why I think it's probably good for business too. So there you go, guys. That's your one sample size of data for why these things work. You can put this in your case study. But I want to hear about you guys, and I'm curious, Justin, I'm going to start with you. Did I sum up Undnyable very well? How would you describe it?
Well, thank you, James, for having us here. And would you like to be our new business person? Because that was awesome. So I think, yeah, you did an excellent job summarizing probably what Steve and I have spent years trying to figure out how to summarize what we do. So we do. I mean, I think we really enjoy doing exactly what you've said, which is, this idea of hacking the bland world of advertising, because in our opinion, there's no real ROI on boring. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, over time, I think Steve and I have a little bit of a cynics, like we have a cynic eye on the whole just industry, just looking at it and having lived in it. Almost, by the way, every creative does. Every single creative is like, okay, this is advertising.
Right.
But I think the difference is we kind of, in addition to having that cynical eye, we have a very optimistic heart. And so we try to see the best in the clients that we're working with and find the crazy fun, human truth that we can flip on its head a little bit and get people to notice, just to notice what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, that's, you spoke a little bit about hey, joining forces with a production company. That's the fun part for us too. It's we all want to go and make something great together, and getting it to that point can be very difficult at times. And when the thing you're going to make is going to be really fun and resonate in the world, then it's just, I don't know, we have a blast. So
yeah, I want to get into that deeply. When I hear this cynical approach, I go to the spot of thinking that's healthy because there's a detachment from the product or the brand that you're working with. There's a detachment that actually gives you the ability to see more of what's going on than they can see themselves, the whole context. And so I don't know, is that true, or is that just me projecting?
I think that's totally true. I think that's why a smart client brings in an outside partner like an agency to have that honest, sometimes requires some cynicism, but that honest eye and objective lens on their business, and kind of to help them get out of their bubble and step out on the sidewalk as a consumer and look back at that brand or that product or that service and say, okay, how does it really live out in the world? What do people really think of it? How do people talk about it? So all that honesty, I think, is super important.
I would also say that Steve and I talk about this a lot. There's these internal lexicons that are built within these organizations, right? So you work for a brand, whether that be, the StubHub or SoFi or Carl's Jr. or any brand we've worked on in the past. And you all have a certain way of speaking and thinking about your brand. And to you, when you're in that organization, it's great because you're an expert at it. But a lot of times it can kind of muddy the waters, and you need someone to be able to elevate above that and say, well, wait a minute, is this, even though you think this is a good reason to believe, or an RTB as they're called, do consumers actually care about that? Do they care about that thing? And is it a true human truth? Because if anything, we know that the greatest comedians in the world are the ones who take something that's just everyone's thinking, but say it in a way that is new and different and makes you really flips it on its head a bit. So
yeah. It made me think of, I've never been a fan of if you're trying to get new business and you're trying to sell yourself by saying, hey, I love your product, or I'm, a big fan of this thing, and kind of approaching it with this affinity toward the actual client that you're trying to get, because I think it actually tarnishes your objectivity. I think that being able to not love it is actually a feature, being able to look at it honestly in a marketplace point of view, and thinking about from objectively what sets it apart from its competition, or what unique thing that this has or offers is easier to say and to define and to articulate in whatever kind of way, funny or emotional. If you have that detachment, if you have that where you're like, I don't care if I love it or not. Was that true or no?
I think there's an element of, at least for me, almost every client that we work on, I'd say every client we work on, I find something that I just effing love about them. I'm just this is the thing that to me is the coolest part of this piece of business and what you guys are doing. And it's true that I love it. And I'm not just being a fanboy. I actually do I love that object or that thing or service. But I probably am expressing it in a way that's more human than they would ever express it. It's more real and relatable. So they would say they love it for these reasons. It provides this amazing service, or it does this amazing thing. And I'm like, no, actually, it's just because it does this, and it's really simple, and I can digest that easily, and I can communicate that easily. So I think it's okay to be big fans of a brand, but you're right. You have to also be able to at the same time see the opportunity that they may not be seeing, to see themselves in a new way.
Right. Well, I want to continue talking about this, but I want to hear more about how you two arrived to be working together and kind of your path and journey here. And so I want to start with you, Steve, because I actually know you best, and we've worked together. You've been a client of mine at a production company, a film studio, when you were at DNA, and I was at All As Well. We've competed against each other, and so I've seen you on many levels. I have mad respect for you, and frankly, I got actually a little bit scared when I heard that you were joining Undnyable. I was like, "Oh shit, that's too much concentration of creativity in one spot." And it actually, I was like, "Oh, I got to work harder in order to compete against the great work that you guys are doing in the town that you both have." But I don't actually know your full story. How did you get started in this business, and what led you to the point of joining Undnyable?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first, let me back up, and also thank you for having us on the podcast. So this is great.
Yeah.
Love to just chop it up about this business. So, thank you for having me. I'm a writer by trade, copywriter by trade. So that's how I got started in the business. I'm from LA originally. Didn't have a whole lot of formal training in this business. I think there's a lot of finishing graduate schools now, fully dedicated. I think I came up in the business when it was more about misfits kind of stumbling into this business because maybe they thought they wanted to go do law or medicine, and then they realized they have a creative spirit in them and they don't really fit in a normal sort of office structure, and so they wanted to find a way to get paid with their brain and imagination. So that was me.
I hear you saying not hireable anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people backed into this business back when I got into it. You kind of fell into it. So I was working at kind of a variety of agencies in LA as a copywriter. Then I started to move up the food chain, and I was sort of a working writer / creative director. That's actually, and Justin and I worked together back then in LA, which maybe that's kind of backstory to how Undnyable, at least in its current form, is today. But we were partners, did a lot of fun, weird, crazy work, but we were really creative partners, and we didn't have to worry about a lot of the other junk that goes on in an agency in terms of being leaders and all that stuff. So we were really, truly working creatives. Then, we continued kind of individually in our own career paths. I ended up moving up to Seattle, was working at a big agency called Publicis and running a lot of big work on T-Mobile and a bunch of other things, visit Seattle and Kraft Heinz. But definitely starting to move more up the food chain. I eventually became an executive creative director at an agency here in town in Seattle called DNA.
And did you make? Were you mostly doing writing that? Then you made the jump over to ECD?
Yeah. Again, and this is like the journey that every creative goes on, and then sometimes you transition well, sometimes you don't. But going from an individual, creative contributor to now you're maybe making work, but also steering the work. And then eventually I got to this position I had at DNA where I was, I'd say maybe a slightly less often working creative as an ECD. I still was definitely making work, and in fact, that's part of why probably we're talking today is because Justin was a big part of a lot of that. But definitely, I was in a much more helping the agency run its day-to-day operations, leading clients, trying to keep my hands in the work as much as possible. But that's easier said than done as you move up the agency food chain.
Yeah.
But learned a ton, and my big goal at my last stop at DNA before I joined Undnyable was to really raise the creative profile of that agency, and I think we did a pretty good job over 3 or 4 years. And then at that point, coming into, I guess it was last year, I started getting the itch to do some different stuff, and Justin and I had worked pretty well together on and off for 20 years. And kind of thought, he's got something good brewing with Undnyable. And we decided, let's take all the things we've learned individually and collectively, both as working creatives and also, sort of GCD, ECD people, leaders who can run projects and deal directly with C-suite level clients. Let's put all that together and make a go of it and kind of take what he's already built with Undnyable and sort of double down and make it even bigger and better.
That's great.
And that's where I am, and that's where we are today.
Justin, I imagine that you got your start like making an ad when you were like 5 years old for something. Dude, I don't know what. That's the picture I have.
You're like a soothsayer. You're able to. All right, I don't know what it is, but no, you're mind reader. Yes, actually I did. So the crazy thing was I was very super into technology when I was a little kid. Like, and this is when I'm talking about technology, these are like stupid, like Betamax, like my dad always had like cameras and stuff. And I'd have all these Hot Wheels and I used to film these like stupid, like Cal Worthington, so in California, there's this guy named Cal Worthington and his dog Spot.
And his dog Spot.
Dude, they were that like Bandini Mountain, like all these crazy things. There's like the low level advertising that was somehow super influential to like an 8-year-old. And then there was like the Cliff Freemans of the world with like the Where's the Beefs and stuff. And I just used to think, man, that's the funniest shit I've ever seen. I would just like, this is awesome. I want to do that. Like, I just want to make funny things. And so I would take my Hot Wheels cars and line them all up and like do these stupid commercials. Like, we got red cars, blue cars, green cars. Like, and then so I would try to mimic these commercials all the time. And then eventually I got into design by way of like forgery because I was just really into computers and I used to make fake IDs and stuff. And then my dad at the time was like, he had a company and he's like, hey, listen, maybe rather than forging driver's license and potentially going to jail, I have a company and I'm paying these people like $3,000 a month to make these print ads for me for my company. Would you want to do them? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And so I started doing that at like age 16 or 17. And I was making like a ton of money doing it. And the crazy thing is like, my first idea was, this was in the LA Times at the time, like every single ad, the only ad space you could buy is a square ad space. And I was like, we're going to make our ad round. And so I literally just for like a year and a half, just made these round ads in square spaces. And like instantly his business like took off because no joke, it was like, everybody saw these ads and purely from just changing the shape of an ad. And I thought, wow, this is pretty, this is fun. And my dad's company was Thomas Hooper French Doors and Windows. And his tagline, which he came up with, was "Be French by the best." And so I was like, okay. So this basically explains my entire career in advertising. But, I ended up going to school for design. I went back to school and I taught design. Then I taught advertising for a while at Cal State Long Beach, typography. And then unlike Steve, in some ways I was a victim of I went into the bookshop, which was the path to advertising was what I was supposed to go do and become. And so I took the bookshop for many years and I highly recommend that class if anybody's ever interested in just upping their creative level game. And then I taught it for many years afterwards. And by teaching it, I built this crazy network. First of all, it taught me how to be a good creative director because you'd have like 30 plus ideas on the board. And 28 of them were horrible and 2 of them were awesome. And you had to somehow make the other 28 good. And so I learned very quickly, like how to find the best in something and then kind of explode it. And then also just mentoring those people, it was just a blast. All the students, it was great. And so then I joined a small agency in Newport Beach called DGWB Advertising at the time. And they did like Wiener Schnitzel and they did really funny, cool stuff. It was near impossible to get a job there. So I fortunately was also a designer and I was able to sneak in the design door and help them build their design department first. But I didn't really want to do that. And I met some very interesting people along the way.
Can I ask you a quick question about design? Please. Because you said design earlier and then you brought up computers and that kind of threw me off a little bit. When you say in design, what do you mean?
So when I worked in design at that time, I was a graphic designer. So I was doing like building typography, doing like posters, and actually I sold like packaging design and all that kind of world. So that's where I started. But what I didn't love about design was highly subjective. It was, if the client, you could work forever on something, and if the client just doesn't like the color purple, you're totally effed. Like there's no, you can't combat it. You're like, well, but purple's a great color. Like you got to just go with what they're going to go with. In advertising, you have that brief and you have the strategy and you have all this backing to support your idea. And so I was really drawn to it. And plus, you get to go on shoots. I mean, it's the best thing in the world. You get to create stuff that other people see. And the ego gets driven by seeing your work out in the world. It's awesome. So anyhow, so I quickly, I'll speed this up. I'm sorry I'm taking so long. But I ran through, DGWB through their design department, worked every single day and just started throwing in ideas for anything I could do. I literally did what they said in all the books you read is like, walk the hallways, ask what people are working on, and just come up with ideas for it and give them away. Just give away every idea you can give. And I did that for long enough that I converted over and became an art director there. And then I moved up to Ogilvy because I was like, I got to get to LA if I'm going to be an ad guy for real. And I was working there with a partner for a while, and it was working great. And then that partner left, and they were like, hey, this guy, Steve Williams, is going to come on board. You know, he's been working around LA and this whole thing. I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And Steve was awesome. Steve had already had more experience than I had. So when we started working together, but he was a total knucklehead like myself. And so the two of us got along really, really well. We were both very cynical. We were very, we enjoyed the humor that is advertising when it's flipped on its head. And so we worked at Ogilvy for many years, and then we parted with Steve, moved up to the Pacific Northwest, abandoned me. And then randomly, one of my former students called me one day and said, hey, listen, I'm working at this agency. You're not going to know the name of this agency at all, but you're going to know the client. And they're looking for a creative director here. Would you want to join? I was like, well, what is it? And she's like, well, it's Carl's Jr. And I was like, oh, okay. I've heard of that. And so then I went there. And I spent the next probably 6 years working on Carl's there and growing to the point where I built a very good relationship with the client. So much so that they kind of handed my partner and I the business, and we owned the business for multiple years.
It was a great run of spots too. I mean, just an incredible series. Yeah.
It was crazy. It was a crazy world. And it taught me a lot about, ignoring the haters and really knowing who your target audience is and diving into that space. And then also just fame. I mean, it instantly skyrocketed the work I did into like national infamy and fame at the same time. So
Right.
people either hate it or they love it. And then I got approached by 72 and Sunny while we were there because they had the digital business. And over the course of a couple of years, we ended up transitioning over. We thought, hey, we're going to win this business. It's going to be amazing and easy and simple. And why wouldn't it come to us? And then it didn't come to us. And it was kind of a bit of a shock. When I joined 72, there was probably 60 people or so, in the 60 to 70 people. And then through the course of time, the Carl's client came back to us just without even a pitch or review and just said, hey, would you like the business? And then we ran it there for 6 years. Plus, we ran some of Activision, to General Mills, and then Truth Initiative, which was one of my favorite clients of all time as well. That's the anti-smoking for teens.
I love that
brand. And they've just historically they've just done amazing work, and we knew we had to do some amazing work to match it. And so then I swear to God, I'm getting to the end of the story soon. I swear.
It's actually fascinating. It's going to be a little bit longer of an episode.
So basically we did this whole thing. It was crazy. And we won the business and I worked there. So there were 70 people when I started. By the time I had left, I had about 120 just in my group alone. So I was overseeing that group, and it was insane. And the growth of 72 was amazing. But my father had passed away recently, and I had a couple little kids, and I thought, I need a change of lifestyle. And the thing I saw that really made Undnyable become a reality for me was, we would be in meetings with, and I swear every creative probably has felt this. I'm sitting in a meeting. There's probably 30 something people all on the laptops. It looks like NORAD. Everybody's like checking the systems. And I probably really only needed like 3 of those people in the room for real. And it was great to have everybody there because they would throw in ideas, but the client was paying for all that. And we thought, that's maybe not the most efficient use of resources. It also was slower. There's meeting upon meeting upon meeting. And so I started Undnyable, left, and I started working client side where I learned a lot, just going client side. And being a part of like an agency pitch from the other side and seeing what wins and what comes down to when it's a tie and what they talk about. And then over the years, I had just different clients come to me and say, hey, would you do our advertising? I'm paying this agency a ton of money and I don't feel like I'm getting much for it. Could you do it? And I was like, sure. And so, and as Steve mentioned, that's when Steve and I kind of rejoined, where he had a lot of projects that were going on up there where he's like, hey, it'd be fun to work together on something like this. And you and I could tackle it. And he was craving that because that is something that happens. No creative goes to school ever to learn how to become a manager. That is not, that's not on our list of things we can't wait to do. But if you don't do it, you kind of, you don't succeed. And so he and I got to build some really fun work for those guys. And then when he decided to leave and make the shift, it was amazing. It was amazing for me because I knew we have this amazing shorthand way of working together, and I knew it would be hyper efficient and hugely successful. And so far it's been a blast. So
that's great. Well, as somebody who's lost a job to you, it was an honor. Like if you're going to lose, you want to lose to you. So there you go. Well, I love that story, and I love hearing about your journey. And I think you've done a good job of talking about what Undnyable does. Do you have a type? I mean, when I look at you, I think, oh, you have a type. Comedy, definitely a comedic approach is the majority of your work. Is that intentional? Or is that a strategy? Is that something that you can look at the data and go, comedy is the emotion that sells X or whatever? Am I even not onto something with that?
I mean, you could call it a sweet spot. That's for sure. Wheelhouse, whatever other cliche you want to use. But yeah, I mean, we think, well, first of all, on a broader sense, it's about unboring and hacking the bland world of advertising. So often humor is a very disarming tool to do that. So yeah, we definitely find that. There's obviously a million flavors of comedy, and some is more about being charming and smart and insightful that really lands. Some of it is just about visual craziness that makes you laugh and react. But comedy is sort of one of the tools. It's definitely the biggest, I'd say, for us, but there's other ways to be provocative, to turn heads, and to kind of get people's attention. It's all in the service of getting that brand noticed and busting through the category conventions, the crutches that most companies use or the jargon they rely on that doesn't mean shit to real people. A lot of that is what we try to bust up, and it usually requires making somebody laugh, because that is how you kind of get them to maybe put the guard down and let you into the tent for them.
Yeah. I think the humor is probably the most digestible solution for if you want to really kind of unboring something. It's the thing that most people won't argue with. Like a client won't be like, oh, well, I don't know if I really want anyone to smile when they see my commercial. So it's hard to argue with that. However, I think, as Steve is saying, like the unboring factor, I think there's a bravery factor to it. I think when we look at clients, we're like, are you willing to do something that maybe, like Truth, for example, there wasn't a lot of humor per se, but there was a lot of like brave stances that you're able to take. Point. Yeah. Even with Carl's, it's like, we knew we were just, the reality of Carl's and those spots, those kind of brand rocket spots were, we knew what we were doing. Like everyone knew what we were doing. And the only people who got mad about it were people who didn't know what we were doing, or who thought we were genuinely trying to say, people eat these people eat these burgers or whatever, And so there was always a smile to it. And so I think bravery and slightly provocative and like all of that is what we hope for. But Steve and I mean, it's very difficult for us to go to start concepting and not try to do something that's like, wouldn't it be funny if we did this?
Yeah. Because that is, we're fans of comedy, comics, comedic people, because it is disarming. The crazy thing is I can remember multiple examples where I've had you going in to show a rough cut, and you've shot this amazing spot. It's hilarious. It hit all the beats you wanted to hit. It landed the point about the brand or the product. And then, and you go and show the client, and they criticize the part that it's too funny. They're like, I'm worried that there's going to be so much laughter in this one moment that then they're not going to pay attention to, the voiceover or the logo that comes up. And I'm thinking, like, am I insane? Like, who's on drugs here? Is it me or is it the client? Because man, if that is an amazingly good problem, that people are laughing so hard and reacting that strongly to your commercial or whatever. It's nuts.
Yeah. And James, you mentioned rewatchability. This idea of like Easter eggs. Well, we're always working like, what's the idea to make this rewatchable? Like,
Oh, it totally
the
works.
worst thing is
Yeah.
seeing an ad 30 times and you're like, oh, like
Yeah.
by the 30th time. But if you see an ad 5 or 6 times, you start to notice things in it. Like Skittles always did a great job of that. Like, all those ads, you'd always like see something happening in the background and then like, holy crap, like it's always interesting.
Yeah, I thought you've done a good job historically too, in the stuff that I've seen where you have your kind of anthem spot and all that kind of stuff. And then you have your maybe your social cuts or your other things that you do that are ripping off of the anthem. And even in those, I found original story. It wasn't just a smaller version of the big ad. It took definitely borrowed from it, but it added some new elements that kept like, oh, okay, it felt like an independent ad in of itself. So I thought that was kind of good.
That's interesting. That's a little bit of a paradigm shift, I think, because when we were back in the Ogilvy days, it was truly like, we are going to do a 15-second cut down of this 30-second commercial because we want the exact same messaging, but in half the time. And now I think with the advent of the, these 6-second ads and shorter time frame, these, not just ads, but like pieces, films, the idea for building original moments in those is like, I mean, we champion that every time. Like, yes, there's the efficiencies of shooting at the same time during the shoot, which you absolutely have to build into it. But as long as you do enough pre-planning for it, you can totally pull that off. And you get so much more of a robust story. If you can do that, if you can do some really funny, interesting 6 seconds that have, not exactly the same as what the 15 is supposed to be. Because getting a 30-second message into 6 seconds is total bullshit. It's just not possible.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
It's not
right.
possible.
And sometimes that means you have to get your hands dirty. Like we did a big campaign called Rewild the Rainiers, which was a sort of like for people in this part of the country, Rainier beer is this really, well-known, regional, beloved beer. And they had these amazing commercials back in the 70s and 80s about the wild Rainiers, which were basically gigantic beer cans with legs that like they roamed the wilderness like elk or something, mysterious creatures, wild creatures. And we had this great project to kind of write the next chapter. And we got out and kind of landed this crazy idea about telling the next chapter and the fact that these majestic creatures are now, much like the rest of us, sitting in cubicles. They've moved to the city. They're working in tech. They're riding segways with like corporate lanyards. Like they've lost all their wildness. And so we hatched this campaign that was all about getting them back into nature. But when we were filming everything, we were shooting the main spot 16:9 with the big fancy camera. But then at the same time, we're with our own phones, smaller devices, GoPros, shooting smaller content on the side, 9:16 stuff over here that's going to go on Instagram. And that wasn't just like, hey, let's wing it. There was thoughtfulness that had to go into planning out one big integrated shoot so that when you come home, you don't just have the footage you need for a 30 and then you hope you can do a cut down. It's like, oh, we came home with all kinds of crazy stuff that was purpose built for, Instagram versus, pre-roll, YouTube pre-roll, or we did a cinema ad that was big and crazy. And so a little bit of planning helps, but that's kind of table stakes now. I mean, that's just how you have to approach these kinds of jobs.
Yeah. Well, you're talking production, and I imagine there's listeners here going, how do I get They're probably already gone to your website. They're looking at these ads and like, I want to work for them. Yeah. I want in on this because the spots they're visually bright and stunning. They sound great. This high level of production quality. You talked about pre-pro, and that's clear in them and getting everything you want. So let's dive into that, because I really want production company owners that are listening to this to understand how best to engage you, and what do you look for in a production partner? And what are some production partners that you've worked with in the past that you've really had good success with?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've worked with all levels, right? Because of the Ogilvy days, we've worked in the giant Joe Picas of the world, and you're shooting around the globe, or you're going with Errol Morris to do crazy stuff. They have their own planes and stuff, all the way down to, we're shooting this thing and we're going to do it on a Saturday, and we're going to stop traffic, and we're going to hopefully get this thing done. And, total run and gun stuff. And And the beauty of that, and I also have a background in directing, so I'm a commercial film director in the DGA, and I've shot a lot of stuff as well. And so I get really
You're dangerous for a production company to be a partner with.
Well, no, and actually, the funny thing about that is you'd think I'd be a pain in the ass about it, but I try to be the opposite of that, which is like super empathetic and like, okay, what do we need to get done? And hey, guys, we got to remember they can't shoot all this stuff. There's no way. We're asking for too much and things like that, and being realistic about it. Also, I think for us, we do a couple different things. Sometimes we do the production ourselves, or we have to take it on ourselves. And that's primarily a budgetary thing. It has nothing to do with like, oh, I can't wait to go shoot something. It's like, if our clients do not have the bandwidth or the spend in order to pull off the thing that we think that we needs to be pulled off, we will do it because we can just undercut ourselves, right? So we'll go do it, and we have to. So
you get you have executive producer, then puts the team together and starts right at it.
That's exactly it. And so we'll do that sometimes. That is not our favorite thing to do by any means. Our favorite thing to do is to find a partner who is really good at the thing that we need to get done, and rely on them and help them and collaborate with them to get it done. A lot of what I look for in that is like people who know their shit, like who are just really, really good at like detail oriented when it comes to like the DP and like all of the whole component of it, like every aspect of it, like they really are figuring out. And I don't feel like there's any murky areas they haven't really discussed. Like they're on it. The fact that they're on everything is really important to me.
Is that confidence or trust, or is it something different than that?
Well, it's because we've been on so many shoots where something can fall through the cracks, and we're always, as creatives, we're so focused on like making sure the work aligns with what we're trying to get done and the client's concerns, that the technical and all the other side of it on production, we really have to know that they're so buttoned up that they're going to get their stuff done. Like we're not going to end up in a situation where they can't shut the street down, or they're not going to end up in a situation where they haven't thought about like, well, yeah, this thing's supposed to fall over, or this couch is supposed to flip over every single time exactly the same way. Have they tested that? Have they tried it like 20 times? Do they have example? Are they showing examples of that to us? I would even say is going as far as like, for me personally, the cost of having two cameras on set and capturing things in two different angles is so minimal that I love that backup component, because it allows us some creative liberties sometimes to be capturing more. Mm-hmm. And then also, as Steve points out, is like, there are sometimes you work with production companies, when you mention social, they're just like, oh, okay, so we got to do the one, we got to do the 9x16:9. We got to do some social content too. And then like, and I get it. It's another task and it's another friggin' deliverable, and it's and they have to take it seriously. So it takes a lot of work to do that. But you kind of want a partner who's already like excited at like, oh, it's going to be, I had a really cool idea for this, because it could be really fun if we did this. And so, and we're not precious about ideas in that way either. We're like, we love high levels of collaboration. So that's what we do.
We also try to push back on our clients. We were talking about this the other day. Like, we'll get a lot of assignments where they'll already have this deliverables list, and it's the number of like shapes and versions and lengths is like overwhelming for what is really maybe supposed to be a simple campaign. So we often, before we even get into creative development, push them and say, why do you need all these? Do you really need that? Do you need a 90-second thing that you have no media for? Do you need, 7 different versions of a 9x16 6-second video? Help us understand the business case for that. And that often helps curate and shave it down a bit, which hopefully then helps, our collaboration with the production company to say, guys, these are the things we need. We know we need them. We have a use for them. They have an important role. So let's make them as awesome as they can be. But it isn't just, we need to like flip the camera and do it again, but in a half the time or something. There's always hopefully a role for it.
And the value of that role, like that object, like, okay, well, how often is this, you want this, you're saying you want a 90-second spot to run on your webpage. Like, how many people are going to see that for real? Like, let's have a conversation about your media, and then what's what spin you actually have against this, and all that.
Which is kind of crazy, because I'd say old Justin and Steve back in the day would be like, 90, screw it. How about 4 minutes? Like we would want to make like everything and the longest thing and the biggest, most expensive thing, because we weren't really, I don't know, probably aware and or worried about where it was going to go. Ultimately, it was going to go on our portfolio, and that's all we cared about. But now that we're, we've been around the block a few times, and we see a little bit of a higher elevation view of our role and our careers and the business, we kind of start to ask maybe harder questions, which ultimately will help put the most dollars in the best places on the screen, which is really what we all want, right?
So have you ever hired a production company where you had a proper budget and you could actually do that you didn't already know?
Many times. Many times. Yeah.
What's typical? Someone that you've worked with in the past, you just trust, or hey, there's someone new, they seem hot, let's give it a shot. What's direction?
Well, I think there's two things that happen there. One, there are some brands that and some agencies that have a roster of editorial and post facilities and production facilities that they just like, we're only going to tool in North America. We're only going to go to these, we're only going to these places. We're only going to these editors. And then there's certain clients, like, yes, there's a shorthand for it. Like when we were doing food for Carl's, it was really difficult to find editors who could understand the right style of cutting that creates the most appetite appeal and things like that. And so there's some specialists, but typically, like I would say most creatives, including ourselves, are very open to who's the right person for this style of work that we're about to go execute. And that's the hardest part for us. I got to tell you, is like, it's a lot of work to identify and find those new people that are like really good at this thing. And so we have found them, but we typically find them through our producers that we hire, EPs, who we'll hire, who are kind of keep a little bit more of a pulse on what's being done out there in the world. The other way we find them is, hey, we saw this really interesting, funny spot. I wonder who shot that. I wonder who directed that. I wonder where that came from. We see him sometimes in award shows. We don't track award shows like we used to, probably as much, because we're a little more focused on not doing that. And so, but I think that has always been the biggest challenge, at least for us, is like having a pulse on like who's the new person who's really good at this cool thing. And the tricky part is like we get a lot of those emails all the time. So it's like, hey, I have this production company. I'm really good at, and I will look at them and I'll look at all the links, but it's hard for me if I'm not working on a project that fits that right now. It's just like us. It's like if we reach out to a brand and they're not looking for advertising, they're not really going to think about us. So we have to kind of keep reaching out, or we have to kind of do other stuff. So.
Yeah, timing is everything, I think, because stylistically they might share something that you think's amazing, but it's not really right for what you're doing. It's really finding the best fit. And Justin and I used to, back when we were just young idiot working creatives, and this is probably going to age us a little bit, like there used to be a thing called a director's library in the agency. And so we would not have a million things to do like we do today. We would be working on one focused project where we would have, call it creative playtime, which is super important, by the way. And I think that's a problem for this industry. We're too scattered. But we had time to like go and sit in, it was literally a room dedicated to director's reels. And there was like one big ass screen, and there was just like walls of like director's reels and production companies, montage reels, animation, VFX, everything. And we would sit there and just plow through that, looking for inspiration, but for sure looking for like, whoa, who is this director? I've never heard of him or her. We have to use them on something. Mm-hmm. And that goes into the mental Rolodex. And hopefully down the road, you have some project where like, oh my gosh, we have to use that director we were looking at a couple months ago. So that element of agency creative life, I don't think exists anymore. And so how creatives find and stay current is a lot trickier because it's just everywhere.
I have two questions there. One is, Justin, you were saying that by seeing other people's work and going, oh, that's interesting for whatever reason, and who shot that or who made it, who produced it. Where do you find work though? I mean, is it just Instagram, or do you actually subscribe to the industry X and follow what's being put out there? how do
I
you
wish I could tell all the
work?
listeners that I subscribe to this one thing and that you should all get on this amazing thing
Yeah.
and all that. But no, it's super haphazard. It's just like I saw this really fucking funny commercial for, whatever it was. And like, I would love to, we got to figure out who shot that. That was really funny. But we also do, I mean, because we are old dogs in this industry, we have a lot of friends who are connected in that world as well. So we have folks that kind of work within different organizations. So a lot of times we'll just reach out to people we know. In fact, like you would be one of them. We'd say, hey, listen, James, like, who do you know that might do something funny like this, or might be really good at this, or so we just reach out to folks that we know, or a lot of producers typically is where it comes from. There did used to be, and I'm not sure I stopped going to them because once you level up in creative and unfortunately you get out of the day-to-day stuff, you don't get to you have too much other shit to do. So, but they used to have the reps would come through and they'd be like, hey, we brought lunch from whatever it is, and we're going to show you the reels. And like 80% of that is just people showing up to get whatever the lunch is and then like suffering through it. 10% of it are usually like people who are like cinephiles, who are like this guy we know, Ed Koenig, who's rad, who like would go to every single one of these things and sit down and watch them and like just fucking eat it up. And then like the other 10% are like creatives who are like, we need to find somebody for this thing we're working on. But the cinephile folks, those are the ones that we reach out to nowadays. And we're like, hey dude, we know, everything right now. What's going on? Like, what's cool? What's interesting? And a lot of times we'll go to finishing houses that we know and just ask those questions too, because editorial places, like they work with all the editors, they work with they work with all the directors and all the production companies. And so they have a good pulse on, oh, we just finished this job for this. It might be really cool if you're doing it for this. And so, we probably should be better at this, basically. That's what I'm saying.
That's the quick way. But I think that's relatively common, though. I mean, it's, influencers, who do you know, that kind of stuff. I think it's really, the idea of this particular archetype of someone who's really into it, paying attention, cares about the spots that are being made in a cinematic, auteur kind of a way, I think is an interesting thing to look at and try to get work in front of. Tell me about your decision making when kind of picking a partner on a couple different kinds of production companies. So you have a production company that represents, a handful of directors, and you're going and looking at their work based on the director, right? This kind of identity kind of decision versus a all-inclusive in-house company that the creative directors and the directors are the same people, the writers are the same people, and everyone, the editor, producers, all in-house. There is no like kind of, I don't know. I always think I'm a little skeptical of the representation stuff. Do you have a preference on one or the other?
Well, I think for us, because we do a lot of work in the QSR space and like in food, just through the years. And so occasionally we'll go to a production company independent of the director because we know that production company is well versed in that specific kind of vertical, right? So like they're really good at food. So that means they know all the best stylists. That means they know how to manage, like the food orders and doing all the kind of crazy, weird nuances behind it. Same thing with like cars. Like if you're shooting cars or shooting any kind of very specific industry thing, there are production companies that just specialize in that. So those specialists sometimes will go to that independent director, but I think more often than not, we'll go to a place that has at least a director or two that we think is interesting. And if that one director is not available, then a lot of times they'll offer up other people. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe that could work. And we actually found really cool people that way too, through some of those production companies.
Yeah, that was a thing that I experienced with, I used to do a lot of work with a company called Imperial Woodpecker. It was founded by a director and a producer, but Stacy Wall, who was actually a former agency creative at Wyden, did a lot of work on Nike, and then became, did the jump and became a director, really, really successful, did a ton of work with him, but he had such a stylistic, like, confidence and a specific style that you knew that if he wasn't available, the roster of people that he was curating, because he was essentially a director / owner of the company. So he really had a hand in the directors that were around him on the roster, and they all just had not necessarily the same style, but they all had this elevated aesthetic that you knew that if you couldn't work with Stacy, you could get someone who could bring something just as elevated and special. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, because sometimes you have all your eggs in one director's basket because you love that particular director, but if they're not available, then you look down the line at the company and go, maybe. Then you start getting into like, okay, either because of budget or whatever, now you're taking the creative chance, right? You're rolling the dice maybe with a director that isn't maybe an expert at what you are trying to do or the style. Maybe they've been more of a visual director and they're trying to get into storytelling, or they do more comedy, but they want to do something more artistic. That's always a creative leap that everybody has to eventually lock arms and do it. And that a lot of that comes from the trust that maybe you have because you have a past relationship with the EP or the owner of the company, and it's less about the director. But
I think to add to that, one important note that most production companies maybe don't think about is that agencies also have to sell the clients on who the person is that's going to go direct the spot. And so if you don't get your first and you're trying to find that second or third,
and name matters at that point, right? Because
the name matters. They're like, hey, we thought we were getting Joyner to do this thing, or we thought we were getting somebody else to do this thing, and you don't have that person. You do still have to sell it. You still have to sell it through somehow. And so it is really important. It's not just like up to the creatives all the time to say, oh, well, we love this guy, we want to work with him. There are other decision makers sometimes. The good news for us and our agency, that doesn't happen. Like, our clients implicitly trust us to get the work done. So they don't really care. They don't care. They know we're going to get it done. So very rarely do we ever have to show a director reel. In fact, I don't think we have in the whole time I've kind of been doing this. So, which has been great. We'll do it sometimes just because we want to show this is the style of work we're going to be going to get. And it gets them excited for it, obviously.
Right.
But yeah.
What about production company? This business is, it's changing and roles are kind of all blending together. What about production companies that are, doing creative development and going direct to brands, right? They're actually stealing some of your business, but they still want to work with agencies, so they want to have a foot in both worlds. Is that a red flag for you? Like, would you say, nah, man, let's just stay away from that. They're getting in our world too much, or does that not matter?
I think there's two ways to think about it. So the way I think we typically approach it is, both Steve and I have worked as hired guns many times. We've worked as these brains that can kind of come in and just be freelancers and understand the client nuances and manage client relationships and create work and all that. And so we have actually partnered with those types of production companies in the past, where they have the aspiration, they have like a client relationship. They have the client relationship already, or they've been approached and they're like, hey, we need some additional creative muscle and we need someone who understands how to speak to these clients. And so we've done that, and we actually see it as a huge opportunity a lot of times when you see a production company that's aspiring to do that. On the flip side, we have been in situations like with you where we were competing against a production company that has a creative arm to it. And after we won that piece of business, I think, we would not go to you to then go execute that work. We would not.
I noticed.
We won it on. Yeah. I don't think it would be a smart thing to do, because it's like they already said no to that brand. So why would we then bring that brand on board? And so
we expected that. Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a bummer, because then, if you partner together and stuff, then there's other ways to win together. I would, the one thing with the production company model that so I've been a part of that before. I was, when I first left 72, I was jumping around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I joined as an ECD at a place called woodshop.tv. And they were a big food group. And we were they had a great relationship with Taco Bell and some other brands. And they were like, hey, is there a way we could steal some of that creative or just the creative development of that? And I think sometimes production companies, maybe they hire the creatives thinking that the creatives are the missing piece. And they hire maybe a brand person thinking the brand person might be one of the missing pieces, but they don't realize that the properly manage and develop and foster a client relationship like that, it's actually, you have to have skill sets beyond the creative, and you have to have this. You really do have to understand what the client is, what they need at the end of the day, and that's a lot to manage, especially when in the back end you're managing all the production too. And that is actually why we do not enjoy doing all the production ourselves, because it is too much to handle a lot of times to do both of those things. And so I admire them for bringing that on, but I think they may not be bringing the correct bodies. And what I'm also saying is we're the correct bodies. So if you want to bring them on, you need to bring us on.
Yes, we've definitely like white labeled ourselves inside, because I mean, to be honest, like I see it's the Wild West. So let's just put that out there. It's the Wild West. Everybody's kind of showing up in a lot of different ways, saying they do a lot of things that they may or may not do. And that's fine, because sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. But there's a lot of production companies that are trying to basically, work directly with brands. And I think depending on certain projects, that's totally viable and appropriate, because really maybe either the client has a specific idea of something they want and they need executional help or production muscle. But it's the parts where it's foggier and there's a lot more work that needs to go in up front, where I would say it's pretty hard to fake the experience of being on the inside of an agency and knowing how agencies and clients collaborate during creative development. The other piece I've seen also that's a challenge for production companies is they don't know how to charge for it.
Right.
And I've seen this more than one company where there's no agency involved. So they're already like, oh, this is awesome. Right? We're kind of working directly with a big company. But the brief is 10 pages and they've got some half-assed script that's like 14 minutes long, and they really need like 2 30s and a 6. And that production company doesn't know how to capture the value, because frankly, that's what Justin and that's what we get paid a lot of money to do, is that part of that early chapter of the creative development. There's a huge value to that, and people should be getting paid for that. And I think a lot of production companies have struggled to figure out how to monetize that part of it, because you're leaving a lot of money on the table, and you're not showing value to that when you're only focused on the production money, because that's a separate pot of money.
And in fact, if between the two, that's in the long run for sure is the least amount of money. Like the real money, and I mean, it's one of my missions of this show is to get people to understand that the real money is in the creative and in the strategy and in the value of the outcomes of the clients.
Right, but you need the right people and the right roles and the subject matter experts to own that stuff, so that you're not finding yourself in like, wait, what? All of a sudden I'm running an ad agency and I really just want to be a production company.
Right? Well, I think that
companies have to figure that out.
Yeah. It also, and that's why I was saying with, you look at an agency and you think, well, I know the creatives. The creatives are great. We work with them all the time. We'll bring them on board. They're going to come help us, and they'll help us with the client. And then now we have everything. Well, but not all creatives are created equal in that way. And I think the challenge is like creatives are creative and they can come up with amazing ideas, but are they really helping build the brand and help build the business? And are they concerned with what the business, the needs of that specific client? And I think, when those production companies are not making the money, it's because they're selling assets. They're selling, we will make the following assets for you. We will solve the following business issues that you need. And that's where we come in, is we solve the business issues. They produce the assets. And so therein lies that's a disconnect there.
And part of this whole conversation is you have to decide what you're good at, and you have to be honest with yourself about what you're not good at, right? So like at Undnyable, we don't bring us a website project. Like we are consumers of websites. We are visitors to websites, but we don't make websites. We're not good at it. We don't like it. You need to call we can probably turn you on to some friends that might be able to do it, but we are perfectly happy saying there are things that we are not great at, that are not in our wheelhouse. But here's the things that we really do focus on: building brands, video creative, like all that great stuff. And this is the flip side of the Wild West of like, you can find yourself in meetings like dancing and telling clients you can do all this stuff and bring this full agency muscle which, you just be careful what you wish for, because the calls will be coming from all angles. And suddenly you're like, wait, but I really just want to turn the cameras on and make some cool stuff. And it's like, okay, cool.
And I started off the show talking about my appreciation for what agencies do. I've worked in agencies, worked in brands, and I've worked in production. I find my sweet spot in production, but my experience, even in production, going direct to brands, is just gave me a very insightful appreciation for how much work goes into client development. It is a lot of work, and it's so fragile. And if you're not good at that, you're in it for the short term. You're not going to last.
Yeah, and I think maybe sometimes production companies, not that they fail to realize, but it's just not on the radar. They're working, let's say, on a 5-week, 8-week cycle on this project. We brought them this cool commercial. We're going to pre-production. We're going to shoot it. We're going to do the post-production. There may have been months, 6 months, 9 months in the agency client development to get to that point. So it's almost like a wave that's like slowly growing as it's getting closer to shore. And the production company is just seeing it as it curls over and hits the shore. There's so much. I mean, Justin and I worked on projects which is insane. Like they've gone on for a year before we finally got greenlit to go then produce the campaign, because they're doing research, or there's do-overs, or the brief changes. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And so if you want to be an agency, quote unquote, which we don't even know, we're not even sure we want to be an agency. We're sort of a non-agency agency. You have to be signed up for that stuff and figure out how to charge for it.
Yeah. You guys have been a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate how transparent you are. I have questions that I haven't even touched yet, but I fear the show going on. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 or something like that. Yeah, 2-parter, an episodic podcast series. I want to just end it on one last question. And so inevitably, listeners are going to be wanting to work for you, and they're going to reach out to you. And whether this is, I'm going to use you as the case study here, but I think it could be applied to anyone they want to work with. What do you want them to say to you? They're going to they're going to go to your website. They're going to they're going to find you on LinkedIn. And what do you want? Do you want them to send you a bunch of stuff? One thing that speaks to who, why, and what? Or do you want them to introduce themselves? Do you want them to say a funny joke? What's the way to approach you?
I think, and this is how we try to approach clients, is just before you send anything, try to figure out who it is you're talking to. So whether that's us or it's some other agency or whatnot, if it's us specifically, we've spent a good hour telling you what we're like and what we're about and what we do. And so if you have work that actually does that is like funny and disruptive or bold or does those things, we'd love to see it. Just send it. Just say, hey, look, check out our reel. I think this aligns with who you guys are as a brand because blank, and play back why you think it aligns with us. And then it connects. Where we get off put is when it's like, hey, check out our latest reel. our spring reel is available. Let me show you our spring reel. It's like, I don't even open that link because I got to tell you, there's no thought. I'm sure that's sent to a million people and they don't understand my brand. And I'm not going to take the time to dig through your reel to figure out if there's anything in there that I like. And so
there you go.
I can't imagine a client's going to do that either. So that's why when we're with a lot of help and guidance, and James, you've helped us with this as well, is like, how can we be the most relevant in that conversation and make it as easy for that person to like believe the connection is going to be a good connection. So again, if you have something that's funny and awesome that you think fits our style, look at our stuff, like look at our reel and say, hey, you guys do this. We do something like that too. Take a look at it. And then also if you do have client relationships and you need help, we're around. We can always help too.
Yeah. Listeners, you've been hearing the wise words of Justin Hooper and Steve Williams from the ad agency Undnyable. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and you feel inspired to introduce yourselves to them or any other talented ad agencies like them. Justin and Steve, thank you both very much for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for listening to Crossing the Axis with James Keblas. If you're interested in joining the conversation or have a topic you'd like covered, please drop a note at keblas.com. That's Keblas.com.